What's the rarest Pokemon? That's a question most Pokemon fans have probably asked themselves at one point. And recently I decided to not only ask myself that question, but also send myself down the rabbit hole trying to uncover the rarest of them all. But there's a problem. The idea of rarity really is a subjective concept. There might be a Pokemon you think is super rare, but someone else just doesn't. If you would have asked me when I was a kid, I probably would have said something stupid like the Regis in Generation 3, because I was too stupid to figure out how to get them myself. I mean, I didn't have internet for the majority of the early 2000s, like most people did. And the only reason I knew Deoxys even existed was because some kid in my class had a Game Shark.
Daddy, chill.
What the hell is even that?
But with that being said, I did make a list of 7 Pokemon that I think are incredibly rare. And I'll be sharing them all with you, alongside the backstory behind all of them. However, I won't be covering Shiny Ranger Manaphy for this video. Simply put, I personally feel like this Manaphy has already gotten a ton of attention. Plus, JWittz already made a video about this recently. So I'll link that video in the description if you want to check it out. And the last one is, in my opinion, the rarest Pokemon to ever exist. In fact, it's so rare it might not even exist anymore. And hey, maybe you own one of these Pokemon. If so, let me know, because that would be very cool. Starting off, we have Zigzagoon. I said what I said, not just any Zigzagoon, of course. The Zigzagoon I am referring to is from Generation 3. It's shiny and it's holding a Lychee Berry, which is the rarest obtainable berry in the entire game. Lychee berries are used to create gold Pokeblocks. And outside of this Zigzagoon, they can only be found on Mirage Island. Mirage Island only has a 1 in 65,536 chance to appear, or a 1 in 10,923 chance if you have a full party of Pokemon. There was a glitch in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. The short version is, it had to do with the game's in-game clock. And in order to fix this glitch, here's what you had to do. You need a copy of Ruby or Sapphire version 1.0, or if you owned an English version, you could either use 1.0 or 1.1, a copy of Fire Red and Leaf Green or Emerald, a link cable, and 2 Game Boys. And if you followed the instructions you see on the screen, you'd be able to transfer the patch over to Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. And if you did this, the game would reward you with a shiny Zigzagoon holding a Lychee Berry if you had an open slot in your party. There were a couple of other ways to receive this Zigzagoon without all of these steps, such as a GameCube demo disc being available at certain stores throughout the US and Japan, where players could receive the patch and the Zigzagoon. However, the GameCube disc also didn't reject games that already had the patch, so you could get as many Zigzagoons as you wanted. Also worth noting, if you lived in the UK, instead of the GameCube demo disc, certain stores in the UK would have specifically made Game Boy cartridges, which basically did the same thing as the demo disc, with the use of a link cable. This cartridge also did not block already patched games, and would also give unlimited Zigzagoons. Though I couldn't really find as much information about these cartridges as I did the GameCube disc. Another thing you could do would be to link the game to Pokemon Colosseum or Gales of Darkness for the GameCube, and the update would happen automatically. But the most interesting way of doing this that I could find was actually a set of e-reader cards. Though this only worked for the Japanese versions of the game, they were released in 2004 and that's actually pretty cool. Or you could actually send the game cartridge to Nintendo and they would do it for you and ship the game back, which was available all the way up to August of 2012. Still, owning this Zigzagoon today, I'd say that's pretty damn rare. This is also the only Pokemon on this list that I can proudly say that I own myself. Let's talk about Spinda. You probably knew I had to mention this thing before you clicked on the video. So Spinda itself is not rare, it's unique. What makes Spinda unique is its pattern, also referred to as spots. These spots are based on Spinda's personality values. Without going through too much extensive math, there are about 4 billion different patterns that a Spinda can have. And I swear I have seen every single one of them while I was looking for a stupid Skarmory. So what makes Spinda rare is not Spinda itself, it would actually be 2 Spindas with the same pattern. You can say 2 shiny Spindas too if you want, but with these numbers it's really just aesthetics at this point. But there is one thing about Spinda that drives me up the wall. Every time I see a video about Spinda, I see the exact same comment over and over again. and it kinda grinds my gears a little bit. Some people believe that the rarest form of Spinda is a spotless Spinda. Well, the truth is, spotless Spinda is actually the least rare version of Spinda, because it doesn't exist. Well, it does, but not in the way you think. Spotless Spinda is actually used as the base for all Spinda patterns, meaning the lowest amount of spots a Spinda can have is 1. Spotless Spinda is not obtainable. Please stop looking for it. Did you know Pokemon Crystal was the first Pokemon game to offer online connectivity? Let's talk about Celebi. There was actually an online Celebi event in the early 2000s for Pokemon Crystal, using the mobile Game Boy adapter and a paid subscription, which was around 100 yen, about 70 cents in today's world. With the mobile Game Boy adapter and a paid subscription, Japanese players could play online by connecting their Game Boy to their cell phones, allowing Japanese players to trade and battle with each other all over the country. But probably the biggest part of this system is that it gave you access to the GS ball. Now, for those that don't know, the gold ball that Ash runs around with in the Johto series, with a whole storyline behind it ultimately ending with nothing, with Pokemon hoping that we would forget, we didn't, was originally planned for Celebi. Once the player receives the GS ball in Pokemon Crystal, you could take the GS ball to Kurt. And unlike the anime, stuff actually happens! After all of this, the player was then able to encounter Celebi in Ilex Forest. This event was brought back to the Virtual Console release of Pokemon Crystal for the 3DS. However, if one of these original Celebis still exists, it would be one of the rarest Pokemon ever. Though I highly doubt that one exists. And the reason why I doubt it is the internal battery. See, in older Pokemon games, once the internal battery runs dry, the save file is deleted, and the game can't save unless the battery is changed. This is also a much bigger problem in the Generation 2 Pokemon games because of the day and night cycle. Simply put, the in-game clock is constantly running, meaning the battery life for a Gen 2 game is significantly shorter than Gen 1 games. And there's also no way to move Celebi from Crystal to the newer games without some shenanigans that some people may not view as legal. The Pokepark eggs and Pokemon. There's actually quite a lot to say about these eggs and Pokemon, but first let me explain where all this comes from. There was a Pokemon amusement park called the Pokepark, located in Japan. This park opened in March of 2005 and closed down in September of 2005, meaning it was only open for about 6 months total. The park had what most amusement parks have: rides, stores, activities such as movies and more. They also had these Spinda statues, and that's close enough! But the park was closed down because of a lack of popularity. The park also included several exclusive Pokemon cards, such as Celebi, which we've already mentioned. But the eggs. If you visited the park, you had a chance to receive an egg for your Pokemon game if you brought it. The Pokemon inside the egg would have an exclusive move that the Pokemon normally couldn't learn. The most popular out of all of them is Tailo with the move Feather Dance. However, there were actually a lot, and I mean a lot, more Pokemon you could receive from these eggs. The Pokemon you could receive from the eggs were of course Tailo, Psyduck, Spinda, Pichu, Igglybuff, Corsola, Surskit, Wishmer, Skitty, Spoink, Plusle, Minun, Cacnea, Wynut, and Corphish. These Pokemon were also not shiny locked, or at least the Tailo wasn't shiny locked. I couldn't find any more information about the others, as Tailo seems to be the only really popular one, but I assume they were not shiny locked. So if anyone managed to snag a shiny Pokepark egg during that 6-month period, dear lord. But shiny or not, any of these Pokemon would be considered extremely rare. There is actually another Pokemon from the park as well, that being Meowth, which was only available for a 3-month period between March 2005 and May 2005. And I couldn't find any information about this Meowth, but if it wasn't shiny lock, I'd say that's even rarer. Shiny Wishmaker Jirachi. Let's be clear, shiny Jirachi is not seen as super rare on its own. There's already been 3 events that gave out shiny Jirachis, so it's fair to say that there's quite a few of them in circulation. The Jirachi we want to focus on is different. As you can probably tell by its name, Wishmaker Jirachi. The name Wishmaker comes from the original trainer name when you receive it, being Wishmaker, so Wishmaker Jirachi. So why is this specific Jirachi so special? Well, part of it is that it takes a long time to shiny hunt it, but also because he's rather expensive. After doing some quick research, in order to get your hands on a Wishmaker Jirachi, you need a GameCube, a Game Boy Advance, a copy of Ruby or Sapphire, a GameCube to Game Boy Advance link cable, and the Pokemon Coliseum bonus disc. All in all, it's gonna cost you between $460 and $630 if you have none of it. In order to get it, you need to set everything up. You need to start a new game on your Game Boy game, get your starter, beat the rival, and receive the Pokédex. From here, you have to watch a cutscene from your Pokemon Coliseum bonus disc, and have an open slot in your party. This process takes about 10 minutes, but there is a save glitch one can use to take that time down to about 2 minutes. But there are some good news too. Well, for one, there is no limit to how many Jirachis one can get, because it's received based on your trainer ID, which is different every time you start a new game. There is also a problem with the coding for this Jirachi. Normally, a Pokemon from these games would have a 1 in 8,192 chance of being shiny, but Wishmaker Jirachi doesn't. The odds of this Jirachi being shiny is 1 in 7,282, which is a lot better, but it's still painful. What makes shiny Wishmaker Jirachi so incredibly rare is the amount of money you have to put in just to receive it, alongside a long time between encounters. With that being said, there are some dedicated shiny hunters out there who has managed to get their hands on it. Pokeball Magearna. Look, I know, I'm well aware that Pokeball Magearna, though it is rare, it's not rare enough to call it the rarest Pokemon ever, but I wanted to include at least one Pokemon that you can get your hands on right now, without any sort of retro equipment. And the most difficult Pokemon that you can get right now is Pokeball Magearna. So let's get into it. Pokeball Magearna can only be obtained through the Pokemon Home app, unless you buy it online for $5, which I hope it comes with a PK Hex certificate. And in order to get Pokeball Magearna, you have to obtain every single Pokemon in the Pokemon Home Pokédex. What makes the shiny charm easier to get in the main series games is that you don't actually have to complete the Pokédex to get it. You don't need the mythical Pokemon, though that's really only relevant for the national decks, which we haven't had in a while. But for Pokeball Magearna, mythicals are needed. You need to register all 1025 Pokemon in the Pokédex. But you can get it right now yourself if you have the time and effort. And the last Pokemon I want to talk about is Mew. And just like every other Pokemon on this list, it's not just any Mew. It's a very specific Mew. In fact, I'm talking about the first event Pokemon ever. In the May 1996 issue of Coro Coro Magazine, which is a magazine that covers Pokemon topics to this day, they revealed that they would give Pokemon fans a chance to win the first ever legitimate Mew by filling out a slip which came alongside the magazine and mail it in. Now, I would like to add that there is speculation that this contest was actually a publicity stunt. You see, Mew was never intended to be in the Generation 1 games, and was designed and put into Pokemon Red and Green by programmer Shigeki Morimoto 2 weeks before the game's release, without Nintendo's knowledge, and that the contest for a legitimate Mew happened because of the large amount of Japanese children finding Mew through various glitches. This was also Pokemon creator Satoshi Tajiri's idea, but I won't cover all of that in this video, but I already have a video on my channel talking about Mew's creation, which I'll leave in the description if you want to understand more about this. Yes, the magazines. Like I said, there was a slip within the magazine. You filled it out, mailed it in, and you had a chance to be chosen as a winner. Almost 80,000 people entered, and out of almost 80,000 people, only 20 were chosen as winners. The 20 lucky winners then had to send in their copy of Pokemon Red or Green, and programmer Shigeki Morimoto would create the Mews and trade them over to your game himself before they were sent back. These Mews were supposedly level 5, only knew the move Pound, and the original trainer name was CoroCoro. And the trainer ID was between 1 and 20. That means that at one point, there were only 20 people in the world who had a legitimate Mew, handmade by the creator of Mew himself. But, just like Celebi, there are some bad news. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, in the older days of Game Boy, once the internal battery dies, so does the save file. And the odds of one of these Mews surviving for almost 30 years? It's microscopical. Unless there is one way, one fully legitimate way, one could have survived. Pokemon Stadium. If one of these 20 winners transferred their Mew into Pokemon Stadium with the transfer pack, it is still there. And that seems to be the only two legitimate ways one of these Mews can still exist. But what if one of those things actually happened? And what if it was the most unlikely scenario possible? On October 15th, 2022, someone going by the name Julius Blaze made a post to Project Pokemon, trying to find out if any survived. Though the trail very quickly grew cold, his Reddit post suddenly received a comment by someone going by the name Akon Walker. He said he had bought a copy of Pokemon Green in Barcelona, Spain in late 2020 at a flea market from a person with a French accent, and that the game had a save file with a weird Mew. Here's the picture they posted, and if you look closely, the Mew's ID number and the trainer ID is a perfect match. Now, there were a few problems. One, it's sort of impossible to prove if this Mew was actually legit, as there are no other Mews to compare it to. And they instead looked through the rest of the save file for inconsistencies. There was a level 100 Lickitung which had abnormalities, but with the Generation 1 Pokemon games being a glitch party on steroids, it is possible that this was just a glitch, as nothing else on the save file seemed to be off. There was also a letter found within the game box, and they tried reaching out to Junichi Masuda, however, he never replied. There is a lot of evidence to support that this is, in fact, the 16th out of the 20 original Mews from 1996. Though there is also evidence against it, but in the end, this could very well be the only original Coro Coro Mew in existence. I'll leave the entire post in the comments so you can read it for yourself. So I wanted to save this for the end because this is actually what made me make this video in the first place. So there you have some of my favorite rare Pokemon. And I'm wondering, did I leave anyone out? Feel free to let me know in the comments. I'd love to research this area of Pokemon more. But until next time, I hope you have a great day and thank you for watching.